They said she was nothing, worthless, a broken Omega too weak to survive the winter. But when Alpha King Dravenkor paid a fortune for a starving girl on an auction block, he didn't know he'd just bought the one person who would destroy everything he'd built and the only one who could save him. This is the story of Lyra Vance, the Omega who refused to break, the healer who fought a fortress of fear, and the woman who proved that sometimes the weakest voice carries the sharpest truth. Stay until the end to see how one desperate choice changes an entire empire. Drop a like if you believe courage beats cruelty, and comment which city you're watching from. Let's begin. The wind bit like a blade. Lyra Vance stood barefoot on the wooden platform, arms wrapped tight around her ribs, trying not to shiver, trying not to exist. The crowd below her stank of sweat, smoke, and impatience. Miners and traders and desperate men looking for cheap labor or cheaper entertainment. She kept her eyes down. Looking at them only made it worse. "Lot 17, the auctioneer barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Omega, 18 winters, no house, no pack, no bond." Translation, worthless. Someone laughed. A man near the front spat into the dirt. Lyra's fingers dug into her sides. She'd stopped eating 3 days ago, not by choice. There was nothing left. Her dress hung off her like a burial shroud, torn at the hem and stained with God's knew what. Her hair, once dark and glossy, now fell in tangled knots over her shoulders. She looked like exactly what she was, a girl with nothing left to lose. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the scent. She could smell everything, every emotion, every lie. The auctioneer's greed rolled off him in thick, oily waves. The crowd's boredom mixed with flickers of cruelty. And beneath it all, threading through the press of bodies like smoke, fear. They were afraid of the cold, afraid of the coming winter, afraid they wouldn't survive. Lyra had been born with this gift, or curse, depending on the day. She could sense truth in a person's scent the way others saw color. Anger smelled like charred wood, grief like rain-soaked stone. Love, she'd only caught it once, years ago, smelled like honey and summer grass. Right now, all she smelled was hunger and contempt. "Do I hear 50 silver?" the auctioneer called. Silence. He cleared his throat. 40! A man near the back raised 2 fingers lazily. He wore a miner's coat, scarred hands, dead eyes. Lyra didn't need her gift to know what he wanted. She'd seen men like him before. They didn't buy Omegas to work the mines. 40 silver to the gentleman in the back, the auctioneer announced, relief flooding his voice. Going once. Lyra's stomach twisted. She thought about running, thought about throwing herself off the platform and disappearing into the crowd. But her legs were shaking too hard. And even if she ran, where would she go? The frontier didn't forgive the weak. Going twice? A voice cut through the square like a whip crack. 500 gold. The crowd went silent. Lyra's head snapped up. At the edge of the square, a figure sat motionless on a black warhorse. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a cloak the color of storm clouds. His face was half hidden beneath a hood, but she could see his jaw, sharp as broken glass, and his eyes, cold, pale, utterly unreadable. The auctioneer's mouth fell open. I'm sorry, my lord, did you say—" 500, the man repeated. His voice was low, controlled, and somehow more terrifying for it. Gold. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew who he was. Everyone did. Dravenkor, Alpha King of the Northern Reaches, warlord of the Frostpeak clans, the man who'd conquered half the frontier before his 30th winter and ruled it with an iron fist ever since. They said he'd killed his own father to take the throne. They said he didn't feel pain, didn't feel anything. And now he was staring directly at her. The auctioneer stammered something about processing the bid. The miner in the back swore and slunk away. The rest of the crowd parted like water as Draven dismounted and walked toward the platform. Lyra couldn't breathe. He stopped at the base of the steps, one gloved hand resting on the hilt of the sword at his hip. Up close, he was even more imposing, at least a head taller than any man in the square, built like a siege engine and radiating the kind of cold authority that made grown warriors flinch. But it was his scent that nearly buckled her knees. Iron, frost, old blood. And beneath it all, so faint she almost missed it, Something raw and jagged, like a wound that had never healed. Pain. He was in pain, had been for years, and he wore it so deep no one else could see. "Come," he said simply, not a request, a command. Lyra's legs moved before her brain caught up. She descended the steps slowly, each one feeling like a mile. When she reached the bottom, Draven's pale eyes swept over her, not with lust or interest, but with the cold assessment of someone evaluating livestock. "You can walk?" he asked. She nodded. "Then keep up." He turned and strode toward his horse without another word. Lyra stood frozen for half a second, then stumbled after him. The crowd watched in silence as the Alpha King mounted his warhorse, reached down, and hauled her up behind him like she weighed nothing. She barely had time to grab his cloak before he kicked the horse into motion. And just like that, her old life ended. The ride north lasted 3 days. Draven didn't speak, didn't look at her, didn't stop except to water the horse or let her relieve herself behind a tree. They traveled in silence through forests that grew darker and colder with every mile, the air turning sharp enough to sting her lungs. Lyra clung to his back and tried not to think, tried not to wonder why a man who could have anyone, anything, had paid a fortune for a starving Omega with no name and no value. On the second night, they camped beneath a stand of pines. Draven built a fire with brutal efficiency, then tossed her a blanket and a strip of dried meat without a word. Lyra ate slowly, her stomach cramping around the unfamiliar food. He sat on the opposite side of the fire, sharpening his blade, his face unreadable in the flickering light. "Why did you buy me?" she asked finally. He didn't look up. "Because I could." That's not an answer. His hand stilled on the whetstone. For a moment, she thought he might actually respond. Then he stood, sheathed his blade, and walked into the trees without another word. Lyra pulled the blanket tighter and stared into the fire. She could still smell him, even from 20 feet away, that strange mix of frost and iron and buried pain. It should have terrified her. Instead, it made her curious. And curiosity, she was learning, was dangerous. They reached Frost Peak Fortress on the afternoon of the 3rd day. Lyra had heard stories about the place, whispered around campfires and trading posts. They called it the Iron Citadel, the Mountain of Skulls, a fortress carved into the side of a peak so high the snow never melted, where the Alpha King ruled with absolute power and zero mercy. The stories, she realized, hadn't done it justice. The fortress loomed above them like a monument to violence. Black stone walls rose 50 feet high, studded with iron spikes and crowned with battlements where archers stood watch. The gates were massive slabs of oak reinforced with steel, flanked by guard towers that seemed to scrape the sky. Everything about it screamed one message: "You are not welcome here." Draven rode through the gates without slowing. Inside, the courtyard was a hive of controlled chaos. Warriors sparred in the snow, their breath misting in the frozen air. Servants hurried between buildings with armloads of firewood and supplies. Blacksmiths hammered at glowing metal. And everywhere, Lyra smelled the same thing. Fear. Not the sharp, sudden kind. The slow, grinding kind. The kind that lived in your bones and made you flinch at shadows. Draven dismounted and handed the reins to a waiting servant. Then he turned to Lyra, who was still sitting on the horse, frozen. "Get down," he said. She slid off clumsily, her legs nearly giving out. A woman appeared at Draven's side, older, gray-haired, dressed in severe black robes. She looked Lyra up and down with the warmth of a winter storm. "This is Marin," Draven said. "She runs the household. You'll do what she says." Marin's lip curled. "Another stray, my lord?" "She's not a stray." His tone didn't change, but something in it made Marin stiffen. "She's mine. See that she's fed, clothed, and given a room in the East Wing." "The East Wing?" Marin's voice cracked with disbelief. "That's for—" "Do it." Marin's jaw tightened, but she bowed stiffly. "As you command." Draven turned and walked away without another glance. Lyra stood there, shivering, as Marin's cold eyes raked over her. "Follow me," the older woman snapped, "and don't touch anything." So, the East Wing, Lyra quickly learned, was not where servants lived. It was where the Pack's elite stayed, high-ranking warriors, trusted advisors, people who mattered. The hallways were lined with tapestries and torches, the floors polished stone instead of packed dirt. Marin led her to a small but clean room with an actual bed, a wash basin, and a narrow window overlooking the mountains. "You'll find clothes in the chest," Marin said curtly. "Wash yourself. You smell like the market." "Thank you," Lyra whispered. Marin's expression didn't soften. "Don't thank me. I didn't want you here. None of us did." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Whatever game you're playing, girl, it won't work. The king doesn't keep Omegas. He doesn't keep anyone. So enjoy this while it lasts, because it won't." She turned and left, slamming the door behind her. Lyra stood alone in the silent room, her heart pounding. She walked to the window and looked out at the fortress below. Warriors trained in brutal drills, beating each other bloody. Servants scurried like mice, heads down, invisible. And high above it all, in the tallest tower, she could just make out a figure standing at a window, watching. She didn't need her gift to know it was him. Dinner was served in the great hall, a cavernous room with vaulted ceilings and long tables packed with warriors. Lyra sat at the far end, alone, picking at a bowl of stew while conversations roared around her. No one spoke to her. No one even looked at her. She was a ghost. Halfway through the meal, the hall fell silent. Draven entered through the main doors, flanked by two massive warriors. He moved like a blade cutting through water, smooth, controlled, utterly lethal. Every head bowed as he passed, every voice quieted. He sat at the head table, on a throne carved from blackwood and iron, and surveyed the room with those cold, pale eyes. Lyra felt his gaze land on her, just for a second. Then it moved on. An older man sitting beside Draven leaned in and murmured something. Draven's jaw tightened, but he nodded. The man smiled, a politician's smile, all teeth and no warmth, and raised his cup. "To the king," he called. "Long may he reign." The hall echoed with a thunderous response. "Long may he reign." Lyra watched the man carefully. He was older than Draven, maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair and sharp, calculating eyes. His scent was wrong, slippery, like oil on water. She didn't trust him. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the auction block, felt the cold, smelled the fear. Finally, she gave up and slipped out of her room. The hallways were empty, lit only by flickering torches. She wandered aimlessly, trying to make sense of this place, trying to understand why she was here. She found herself in a courtyard, smaller than the main one, enclosed by high walls. Snow fell softly, muffling the world. And in the center, beneath a lone tree, a boy sat crying. He couldn't have been more than 10. Blood dripped from a gash on his forehead, and his arm was bent at a wrong angle. Lyra's heart lurched. She crossed the courtyard quickly, kneeling beside him. "What happened?" The boy flinched. I fell during training." "Let me see." "No." He scrambled back. "I'm fine. I don't need help." "Your arm is broken." "It doesn't matter." His voice cracked. "If I cry, they'll say I'm weak. If I ask for help, they'll send me away." Lyra's chest tightened. "Who told you that?" "Everyone." He wiped his eyes roughly. "This is Frost Peak. Weak people don't survive here." She stared at him, at this terrified child who'd learned to bleed in silence, and something inside her snapped. "Give me your arm," she said quietly. "But give it to me." He hesitated, then slowly extended his broken arm. Lyra closed her eyes and placed her hands on the fracture. She'd never told anyone about this part of her gift, the part that let her do more than sense pain, the part that let her ease it. Warmth spread from her palms, flowing into the boy's arm, knitting bone and tissue back together. It wasn't magic. It was something older, something she didn't understand. The boy gasped. "What? How?" "Shh." She kept her eyes closed, focusing. The warmth grew hotter, brighter, until she felt the bone click back into place. Then she let go. The boy stared at his arm, flexing his fingers in disbelief. The gash on his forehead was still bleeding, but the break was gone. You fixed it," he whispered. "I eased it," Lyra corrected. "The rest is up to you. Now go, before someone sees." He scrambled to his feet, then paused. "What's your name?" "Lyra." "Thank you, Lyra." He disappeared into the shadows. She sat back exhausted and let the snow fall on her face, and didn't notice the figure watching from the tower above. Morning came too soon. Lyra woke to pounding on her door. Marin's voice cut through the wood like a knife. "Get up. The king wants to see you." Her stomach dropped. She dressed quickly and followed Marin through the winding hallways to a room she hadn't seen before. Draven's private study. It was sparse, brutal. A desk covered in maps and reports, weapons mounted on the walls, a fire crackling in the hearth. And in the center of it all, Draven stood with his back to her, staring into the flames. "Leave us," he said. Marin hesitated, then bowed and left. The door closed. Lyra's pulse hammered in her ears. "You healed the boy," Draven said. Not a question. "Yes. I didn't give you permission to use your abilities. You didn't tell me I couldn't." He turned. His eyes were colder than she'd ever seen them. "This fortress operates on one principle: strength. You undermine that. You undermine everything." He was a child. He was weak. He was hurt. And now he'll be weaker for it. Draven's voice didn't rise, but the fury in it was unmistakable. "You think you did him a kindness. You didn't. You taught him to rely on someone else, to expect mercy. And mercy gets people killed here." Lyra's hands clenched into fists. "So what, you'd rather he suffer?" "I'd rather he learn." "Learn what? That pain is the only truth? That asking for help makes you worthless?" She took a step forward, anger overriding fear. "That's not strength. That's cruelty." Something flickered in his eyes. Just for a second, then it was gone. "You don't understand this world," he said quietly. "You don't understand what it takes to survive here." "Then teach me." He stared at her. "What?" "You brought me here for a reason. So teach me. Show me why fear is better than trust. Why breaking people makes them stronger." She lifted her chin. "Or admit that you're just as trapped as everyone else." The silence stretched between them like a drawn blade. Then Draven turned back to the fire. "Get out," he said. Lyra didn't move. "No, get out. Not until you tell me why you bought me." He spun, crossing the room in 2 strides, and suddenly he was inches from her face. His scent, iron, frost, pain, crashed over her like a wave. Up close, she could see the scars on his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes. "Because I'm tired," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm tired of watching people break, tired of being the one who breaks them. And when I saw you on that platform, starving and scared and still breathing," he stopped. "I thought maybe you'd be different." Lyra's breath caught. "I'm not different," she said softly. "I'm just stubborn." For the first time since she'd met him, Draven almost smiled. Almost. "Then I made a mistake," he said. He turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the study. Lyra stood there, shaking, her heart pounding, and realized she'd just started a war she couldn't win. But she was going to fight it anyway. The next morning, Lyra woke to find a guard stationed outside her door. He didn't speak, didn't acknowledge her when she stepped into the hallway. Just fell into step 3 paces behind, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword. She tried to ignore him as she made her way to the kitchens, but his presence was a weight on her shoulders, a constant reminder that she was being watched. The kitchen staff barely glanced at her when she entered. They moved around her like she was a piece of furniture, their conversations dying the moment she came close. She grabbed a piece of bread and some cheese, then retreated to a corner table. Alone. Always alone. She was chewing mechanically when a girl, maybe 16 with nervous eyes and calloused hands, approached carrying a tray of dirty dishes. "You're the Omega the king bought," the girl said. Not a question. Lyra nodded. The girl hesitated. "My brother, he's the one you helped, last night, in the courtyard." Lyra's stomach tightened. "Is he all right?" "He's fine, better than fine. He told me what you did." The girl glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Thank you, really. But you shouldn't have." "Why does everyone keep saying that?" "Because it's true." The girl's expression turned haunted. 3 years ago, there was a healer here, an Omega, like you. She tried to help people, tried to make things better. She paused. They found her body in the ravine 2 weeks later. They said she jumped, Lyra's blood went cold. Did she? The girl didn't answer. She just picked up her tray and walked away. Lyra sat there, the bread turning to ash in her mouth. The guard was still watching. Days blurred together. Lyra tried to keep her head down, tried to follow the rules she didn't understand, but everywhere she looked, she saw suffering, and everywhere she went, people turned away. A servant girl with a broken finger cradling her hand and crying silently in a storage room. Lyra offered to help. The girl spat at her feet and ran. A warrior limping through the courtyard, blood seeping through his bandages. Lyra approached. He snarled and told her to mind her own business before collapsing 10 feet later. No one helped him up. A woman in the laundry scrubbing clothes with hands so raw they were bleeding. Lyra tried to give her a salve she'd made from kitchen herbs. The woman threw it back at her. "We don't need your pity," she hissed. "It's not pity." "Yes, it is. You think you're better than us because the king brought you here. You think you can fix us." The woman's eyes were hard as stone. "You can't, so stop trying." Lyra walked away, the salve clutched in her trembling hand. That night, she stood at her window and stared out at the fortress. Torches flickered in the darkness. Somewhere below, someone was screaming, training, maybe, or punishment. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. This place was a wound that refused to heal, and she was trapped inside it. A week after her confrontation with Draven, Merrin summoned her to the Great Hall. "The king wants you at dinner," the older woman said curtly. "You'll sit at the high table." Lyra's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because he commanded it. Don't make me repeat myself." The Great Hall was already packed when Lyra arrived. Warriors filled the long tables, their voices a low roar of conversation and laughter. She walked slowly toward the front, acutely aware of every eye tracking her movement. The high table sat on a raised platform, reserved for Draven and his inner circle. She climbed the steps and found herself seated between two men she didn't know, both of them radiating hostility. Draven sat at the center, his face unreadable. The silver-haired man from before, the one with the slippery scent, sat at his right hand, smiling like a serpent. "Ah," the man said, his voice smooth. "The king's newest acquisition. How delightful." Lyra said nothing. "Forgive me, I don't believe we've been introduced." He extended a hand. "I'm Varric, the king's uncle and chief advisor." She didn't take his hand. "Lyra." Varric's smile didn't falter, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Charming." Draven's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. "Eat." Servants appeared with trays of food, roasted meat, bread, stewed vegetables. Lyra picked at her plate while the men around her talked strategy and supplies. She caught fragments of conversation. Border raids, grain shortages, a clan to the east refusing to pay tribute. Varric leaned toward Draven. "We could make an example of them, send a message." "We could," Draven said, "or we could negotiate." "Negotiate?" Varric's tone sharpened. "Since when do you negotiate with defiance?" "Since slaughtering potential allies became bad strategy." The table went quiet. Varric studied Draven for a long moment, then smiled again. "Of course, my lord. Your wisdom, as always." But his scent spiked, anger, bitter, and sharp. Lyra looked down at her plate, her pulse racing. This man was dangerous, more dangerous than Draven, because Draven's cruelty was honest. Varric's was hidden behind politeness and pretty words. After dinner, Draven dismissed the hall. People filed out in groups, their voices fading into the night. Lyra started to follow, but his voice stopped her. "Stay." She froze. The hall emptied until it was just the two of them and the dying firelight. Draven stood at the head table, his back to her, one hand resting on the blackwood throne. "You don't like Varric," he said. It wasn't a question. Lyra chose her words carefully. "I don't trust him." "Why?" "Because his scent is wrong." Draven turned. "Explain." She hesitated. Talking about her gift felt like exposing a wound, but he was waiting, and something in his expression told her he wouldn't let this go. "I can smell emotions," she said finally. "Not just surface ones, deep ones. The things people try to hide." She met his eyes. Your uncle smells like ambition and resentment, like he's waiting for something. Waiting for what? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not good for you. Draven was silent for a long moment. Then he walked down from the platform, closing the distance between them until he was standing just a few feet away. Varric raised me, he said quietly. After my father died, he was the one who kept this fortress from tearing itself apart. He taught me how to rule, how to fight, how to survive. That doesn't mean he's loyal. No, Draven agreed. It doesn't. He turned away, staring into the fire. But I can't act on suspicion, not without proof. Then let me find proof. He looked at her sharply. What? I can get close to people. Listen. Watch. She straightened. No one notices servants, and no one sees Omegas as a threat. This isn't a game, Lyra. I know that. If Varric suspects you're spying, he won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. She stepped closer. You said you were tired of breaking people. So stop. Let me help. Draven stared at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that wasn't cold or controlled. He looked lost. Why do you care? He asked. Because someone has to. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. Finally, Draven nodded. Fine. But if this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, he continued, his voice hard, I can't protect you. Do you understand? Yes. Then get out of here before I change my mind. Lyra turned and left before he could see her hands shaking. The next day, she began watching. She moved through the fortress like a shadow, her eyes and ears open. She learned the rhythms of the place, when the warriors trained, when the servants worked, when Varric held his private meetings in the West Tower. She couldn't get close to those meetings. Guards stood at every entrance, and the door was always locked. But she could watch who came and went, and what she saw made her skin crawl. Varric met with warriors, not Draven's inner circle, men further down the chain, ambitious ones, angry ones, men who'd been passed over for promotions or publicly disciplined. He spoke to them quietly, always smiling, always sympathetic. Lyra couldn't hear the words, but she could smell the result, loyalty shifting, resentment growing. He was building something, slowly, carefully, a rebellion. 2 weeks into her surveillance, Lyra made a mistake. She was trailing one of Varric's men through the lower corridors when she turned a corner and nearly collided with Merrin. The older woman's eyes narrowed. What are you doing down here? Lyra's mind raced. I got lost. Lost? Merrin's tone dripped disbelief. You've been here 3 weeks. Try again. I was looking for the infirmary. The infirmary is in the east wing. This is the west wing. Merrin stepped closer. I don't know what you're playing at, girl, but I'm watching you. One wrong step, and I'll make sure the king knows exactly what kind of viper he brought into his house. She swept past, her robe snapping like a whip. Lyra stood frozen, her heart hammering. She'd been careless, and carelessness got people killed. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced her room, trying to think, trying to figure out her next move. Merrin's warning echoed in her head. She was running out of time. A soft knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find the girl from the kitchen, the one whose brother she'd healed. I need to talk to you, the girl whispered. Lyra pulled her inside and shut the door. What's wrong? My brother. He's been assigned to night patrol in the North Tower. So he's 10 years old and barely trained, and the North Tower is where they send people they want to disappear. The girl's voice cracked. Please, you have to help him. Lyra's chest tightened. Why would they do that? Because someone saw you heal him, and now they're punishing us. Ice flooded Lyra's veins. Who saw? I don't know, but my brother's terrified, and I don't know what to do. Lyra grabbed her cloak. Where is he now? The barracks. They're moving him out at dawn. Then we move him first. The girl stared. What? You heard me. Take me to him. Now. They slipped through the fortress like ghosts, avoiding patrols and sticking to the shadows. The barracks were a squat stone building at the edge of the courtyard, filled with rows of narrow cots. Most of the warriors were asleep, their snores echoing in the darkness. The girl led Lyra to a cot near the back. The boy, her brother, sat hunched over, his face pale. "Lyra?" he whispered. "Come with me, quickly." "I can't. If I run—" "You're not running. You're being reassigned." She looked at the girl. "Who's in charge of patrol assignments?" "Commander Terran, but he'll never—" "Take me to him." They found Terran in the guardhouse, reviewing schedules by candlelight. He looked up when Lyra entered, his expression hardening. "What do you want?" "The boy assigned to the North Tower. I'm requesting he be reassigned." Terran laughed. "You're requesting? Who the hell do you think you are?" "Someone the king listens to." His smile faded. "The king doesn't care about one scrawny boy." "Try him and find out." They locked eyes. Lyra could smell his uncertainty. He didn't know how much influence she had. Didn't want to risk crossing Draven. Finally, Terran scrawled something on the schedule. "Fine. He's reassigned to kitchen duty, but if this comes back on me, it won't." Lyra grabbed the boy's hand and pulled him out before Terran could change his mind. She thought that was the end of it. She was wrong. The next morning, she was summoned to the throne room. Draven sat on his blackwood throne, his expression carved from stone. Varric stood at his side, smiling, and in front of them, kneeling on the floor with his hands bound, was Commander Terran. Lyra's stomach turned to ice. "Commander Terran has accused you of overstepping your authority," Varric said smoothly, "of making threats in the king's name without permission." "I didn't threaten him," Lyra said. "I made a request." A request backed by the implication that the king would punish him if he refused. Varric's smile widened. "That sounds like a threat to me." "I saved a child's life." "You undermined the chain of command. The chain of command was going to kill him." "Enough." Draven's voice cut through the argument like a blade. He looked at Terran. "Did she threaten you?" Terran hesitated. She implied consequences, my lord." "That's not what I asked. She said you would listen to her. And I will, if she has something worth saying." Draven's gaze shifted to Lyra. "Do you?" Lyra's pulse hammered. This was a test. She could feel it. "The boy is 10 years old," she said carefully. "Assigning him to the North Tower wasn't strategy. It was punishment for something I did." "And what did you do?" "I healed him." The room went silent. Draven leaned forward. "You healed him?" "Yes. Well, after I explicitly told you not to use your abilities." "Yes." "And now you're asking me to overturn a command because you don't like the consequences." Lyra's hands clenched into fists. "I'm asking you to see what this place has become. You punish strength and reward cruelty, and you wonder why your people are terrified." Varric's expression darkened. "My lord, this is insubordination. I'm aware." Draven stood. He walked down from the throne, stopping directly in front of Lyra. "You have a choice. Accept punishment for defying my orders, or leave. Tonight, I'll give you supplies and safe passage south." Her breath caught. "You're banishing me?" "I'm offering you a way out." "What about the boy?" "The boy stays where he was assigned." "Then I stay too." Draven's jaw tightened. "Don't be a fool." "I'm not. I'm being stubborn. Remember?" For a moment she thought he might actually smile. Instead he turned to Terran. "The boy is reassigned to kitchen duty. Permanently." Terran blinked. "My lord?" "You heard me." But, get out!" Terran scrambled to his feet and fled. Draven looked at Varric. "Dismissed." Varric's smile was thin and cold. "As you wish, my lord." He bowed and left. When the doors closed, Draven turned back to Lyra. "You're going to get yourself killed," he said quietly. "Maybe, but at least I'll die doing something that matters. Nothing matters here, not kindness, not compassion, not you. Then why am I still alive?" He didn't answer. Lyra stepped closer. "You keep saying this place runs on strength, on fear. But you're wrong. It runs on loyalty. And loyalty isn't something you can beat into people. It's something you earn. I don't need their loyalty. I need their obedience. And when that's not enough, when someone like Varric decides he wants your throne, what then?" Draven's expression went dangerously still. "What are you talking about?" I've been watching him. He's meeting with warriors, building alliances, planting seeds. She held his gaze. He's planning something. You have proof? Not yet, but I will. Draven stared at her for a long, tense moment. Then he did something she didn't expect. He believed her. Keep watching, he said, and be careful. 3 days later, Lyra found the proof. She'd been following one of Varek's men, a warrior named Kael, scarred and bitter and passed over for promotion twice. She trailed him to the stables, then to the armory, then finally to a storage room in the lower levels. She pressed herself against the wall and listened. Enough men to take the throne room, Kael was saying. But we need the king distracted. Varek's voice smooth and cold. Leave that to me. When the time comes, Draven will be too busy dealing with a border raid to notice what's happening inside his own walls. And after? After we restore order, I take the throne. You and the others get what you were promised. Power? Power, wealth, respect. Varek paused. Everything Draven denied you. Lyra's blood turned to ice. She backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound, and stepped on a loose stone. The scrape echoed like a thunderclap. Inside the room, conversation stopped. Someone's out there, Kael said. Lyra ran. She heard the door slam open behind her, heard boots pounding on stone. She sprinted through the corridors, her lungs burning, her heart hammering against her ribs. She burst into the main courtyard and nearly collided with a patrol. Stop her! Kael shouted from behind. The guards hesitated, just long enough. Lyra bolted toward the keep, shoving past servants and warriors, not daring to look back. She hit the stairs and took them 2 at a time, her legs screaming, her vision blurring. She reached Draven's study and slammed the door open. He was at his desk, reviewing maps. He looked up, startled. Lyra? They're planning a coup, she gasped. Varek, Kael, others. I heard them. They're going to fake a border raid and take the throne room while you're distracted. Draven was on his feet in an instant. When? I don't know. Soon. The door burst open. Kael stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards. His hand was on his sword. She's lying, he said. She's been spying on loyal men, spreading lies about Lord Varek. I heard you, Lyra interrupted. In the storage room, you and Varek planning the coup. Kael's expression twisted. You little... Draven's voice cut through the room like a whip. Enough. Kael froze. Draven walked around his desk, his eyes cold as winter. If she's lying, prove it. Tell me what you were doing in the storage room. Kael stammered. Inventory, checking supplies. At midnight? With Varek? He wanted a report. Then you won't mind if I ask him the same question. Kael's face went pale. Draven drew his sword. My lord, please, on your knees. Kael dropped. Draven looked at the guards. Take him to the cells and bring me Varek. The guards hesitated. One of them, Lyra recognized him from Varek's meetings, stepped forward. With respect, my lord, we serve Lord Varek. Draven's expression didn't change. Then you die with him. The guard drew his blade, and the room exploded into violence. Draven moved like lightning, faster than Lyra thought possible. He blocked the guard's strike, twisted, and drove his blade through the man's throat in one brutal motion. The second guard lunged. Draven sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, and snapped it with a sickening crack before running him through. Both men dropped. Kael tried to run. Draven caught him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. How many? I don't... Draven's blade pressed against his throat. How many men did Varek turn? 20? Maybe 30? Where are they? Scattered, waiting for the signal. What signal? Kael's eyes darted to the window. The beacon. When it lights, they move. Draven followed his gaze. In the distance, on the highest tower, a fire was already burning. No, Draven breathed. He dropped Kael and ran. Lyra followed, her heart in her throat. They burst into the courtyard just as chaos erupted. Warriors poured from the barracks, swords drawn, screaming Varek's name. Loyal guards tried to form a defensive line, but they were outnumbered and caught off guard. Steel clashed against steel. Blood sprayed across the snow. Draven roared orders, rallying his men, but Lyra could see the truth. They were losing. She scanned the courtyard, searching for Varric, and found him standing on the steps of the Great Hall, watching the carnage with a smile. Their eyes met. He raised a hand, and the world went white. An explosion rocked the fortress. The main gate blew inward in a shower of splinters and stone. Men screamed. Buildings collapsed. Lyra hit the ground hard, her ears ringing. When she looked up, she saw Varric walking toward Draven through the smoke and fire, a poisoned blade gleaming in his hand. "I tried to do this quietly," Varric called, "but you never did know when to step aside." Draven's sword was out. "You're a traitor." "I'm a survivor, something you'll never be." He lunged. Draven blocked, but barely. Varric was faster than he looked, and the poison on his blade made every strike lethal. Lyra scrambled to her feet, searching for a weapon, for anything, and saw the boy from the kitchen, terrified, trapped between two of Varric's men. She didn't think. She just ran. She slammed into the first man hard enough to knock him off balance, grabbed a fallen sword, and swung wildly at the second. He blocked easily, laughing, then stopped when her blade bit into his arm. "Omega bitch," he snarled. He raised his sword. Lyra closed her eyes. A roar split the air. Draven appeared out of nowhere, slamming into the man with the force of a landslide. They went down in a tangle of limbs and steel. Lyra grabbed the boy and pulled him toward the keep. Behind her, Draven fought like a demon, brutal, efficient, unstoppable. But Varric's men kept coming, and in the chaos, Lyra saw Varric circling closer, the poisoned blade raised. "Draven!" she screamed. He turned. Too late. Varric's blade flashed toward his chest. Lyra moved without thinking. She threw herself between them. The blade punched through her shoulder, cold and sharp, and burning all at once. She gasped. Draven caught her as she fell. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was his face, twisted with something she'd never seen before. Fear. Word count, 4,240 words. She woke in fire. No, not fire. Pain. Her shoulder burned like someone had shoved molten iron through the muscle. She tried to move and couldn't, tried to speak and managed only a rasping sound. Voices swirled around her, muffled and distant. Too much blood. The poison spreading. She won't make it through the night. A hand gripped hers. Warm, strong. "Stay with me." Draven's voice, rough and desperate. "Do you hear me? Stay." She wanted to answer. Wanted to tell him she was trying. But the darkness pulled her under again. But time became meaningless. She drifted in and out of consciousness, caught between fever dreams and moments of agonizing clarity. Sometimes she heard voices, Marin's sharp commands, the healer's worried muttering. Sometimes she felt Draven's presence beside her, a wall of heat and fury. Once, she opened her eyes to find him sitting in a chair next to the bed, his head in his hands. He looked wrecked, exhausted, lost. "You're an idiot," he said without looking up. "You know that?" She tried to laugh. It came out as a cough. He lifted his head and the expression on his face stopped her breath. Raw, unguarded, terrified. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Someone's had to." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He leaned forward, his pale eyes burning. "If you die, I will burn this entire fortress to the ground. Do you understand me?" Dramatic. "I'm serious." "I know." She swallowed, her throat dry. "That's what scares me." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood and walked out. 3 days later, the fever broke. Lyra woke clear-headed for the first time since the battle. Her shoulders still hurt like hell, but the burning had faded to a dull throb. She sat up slowly, testing her body. Marin appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray. "You're awake." Apparently. The older woman set the tray down, broth, bread, water, and studied her with an expression Lyra couldn't read. "You're tougher than you look," Marin said finally. "Is that a compliment?" "Don't push it." But something in her tone had softened. "The king wants to see you, when you're strong enough." "I'm strong enough now," Marin snorted. "You can barely sit up." "Then help me." Against her better judgment, Marin did. No. Draven was in the throne room, standing at the window with his back to the door. The room was empty except for the two of them. Outside, workers were repairing the damage from the coup: shattered gates, burned buildings, blood-stained snow. "How many?" Lyra asked quietly. 17 dead, 23 wounded. His voice was flat. Varric's men scattered when he fell. Most are in the cells awaiting trial. A few escaped south. And Varric? Dead. I killed him myself. Lyra crossed the room slowly, her shoulder protesting every step. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He was a traitor. He was family." Draven turned. His eyes were hollow. "Family is a weakness. I learned that a long time ago." "That's not true." "Isn't it? He raised me, taught me, and the entire time he was planning to take everything I built." His jaw tightened. "You were right. I didn't see it. Didn't want to see it. You see it now. Because you showed me." He stepped closer. "You threw yourself in front of a poisoned blade for me. Why?" Lyra met his gaze. "Because you're not what this place thinks you are." "And what do you think I am?" "Someone who's tired of being alone." The words hung between them. Draven looked away. "You almost died." "But I didn't." "You could have." "So could you." She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand on his arm. "We're both still here. That's what matters." He stared at her hand like it was a foreign object. Then slowly, he covered it with his own. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "Do what?" "Trust someone. Let them close." He paused. "I've spent my entire life building walls. You're asking me to tear them down. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just here." Draven's grip tightened. "I can't promise I won't hurt you." "I know." "I can't promise I'll change." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" Lyra smiled faintly. "For you to stop pushing me away." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Draven pulled her closer, gently, carefully, like she might shatter, and rested his forehead against hers. "You're going to be the death of me," he murmured. "Probably." He almost laughed. Almost. The fortress changed slowly. Draven didn't announce a new policy or issue a grand decree. He just started listening. When Lyra pointed out that the healer's supplies were dangerously low, he allocated funds. When she mentioned that the servants were working 18-hour days without rest, he adjusted the schedules. Small changes. Quiet ones. But people noticed. The boy from the kitchen, whose name was Finn, became Lyra's shadow. He followed her everywhere, helping carry supplies, running errands, chattering endlessly about nothing. His sister, Kara, began bringing Lyra meals and staying to talk. The servant with the raw hands accepted the salve. The injured warrior let her check his bandages. Slowly, painfully, trust began to grow. But not everyone was happy. "You're making them soft," Marin said one afternoon, watching Lyra tend to a young warrior's broken nose. "They'll expect mercy now, kindness. What happens when the next attack comes and they freeze because they're waiting for someone to save them?" "They won't freeze," Lyra said. "They'll fight, but they'll fight for each other, not just because they're afraid. Fear is what keeps them alive. Fear is what's killing them." Marin's expression hardened. "You don't understand this world." "Maybe not, but I understand people." Lyra tied off the bandage and looked up. "And I know that loyalty built on fear breaks the moment someone stronger comes along. Loyalty built on respect? That lasts." Marin didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. 2 weeks after the coup, Lyra was in the courtyard helping Finn practice sword forms when a horn sounded. 3 short blasts. Raiders. The courtyard erupted into motion. Warriors grabbed weapons and rushed toward the gates. Servants scattered. Draven appeared from the keep, already armed, his face carved from stone. "How many?" he barked at the scout. 50. Maybe more, coming from the west ridge. Formation 3, hold the gates." The warriors moved like a machine. Fast, efficient, brutal. Lyra watched them form defensive lines, archers taking positions on the walls. Draven caught her eye across the courtyard. "Get inside," he ordered. "I can help." "Inside!" She wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. She grabbed Finn and pulled him toward the keep. The battle lasted 2 hours. Lyra stood at the window, watching smoke rise from the western walls, listening to the clash of steel and the screams of the dying. Her hands shook. Her shoulder throbbed. She felt useless. Finally, the horn sounded again. One long blast, victory. She ran to the courtyard. The raiders were retreating, leaving bodies in the snow. Draven's warriors stood victorious, bloodied but alive. And in the center of it all, Draven stood alone, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't his. He saw her, and something in his expression cracked. He crossed the courtyard in long strides, grabbed her by the shoulders, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like smoke and survival. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. "Don't ever do that again," he said. "Do what?" "Make me think I'm going to lose you." Lyra's breath caught.
"I'm not going anywhere."
"You better not." He kissed her again. And for the first time since she'd arrived at this brutal, broken fortress, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. That night, as she lay in her bed with her shoulder aching and her heart still racing, she heard a knock at the door. Draven stood in the hallway, still in his battle-worn clothes, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen. "Can I come in?" he asked. She nodded. He stepped inside and closed the door. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Draven crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed. "I need to tell you something." Lyra sat up. "What?" "After my father died, Varric told me that strength was the only thing that mattered, that compassion was weakness, that if I showed mercy, I'd lose everything." He paused. "I believed him. I built this fortress on that belief. I became the kind of leader who ruled through fear because I thought it was the only way to survive. And now? Now I don't know what I believe anymore." He looked at her. "You've turned everything upside down. The things I thought were weaknesses, kindness, trust, compassion. You've made them into strengths. And He stopped, struggling for words. "I don't know how to be that person, but I want to try." Lyra reached out and took his hand. "Then we'll figure it out together." Draven's grip tightened. "I'm not good at this." "Neither am I." "You saved my life." "You saved mine first." He smiled, a real smile this time, small and fragile and beautiful. "What are we doing?" he asked. "I have no idea," Lyra admitted. "But I think it's called hope." Draven leaned forward and kissed her forehead. And in that moment, in that cold, brutal fortress where weakness was supposed to mean death, they both felt something stronger than fear. They felt alive. They felt alive, but alive didn't mean safe. The morning after the raid, Draven called a council meeting. The great hall filled with his remaining advisors, warriors who'd proven their loyalty during the coup, commanders who'd held the line against the raiders. Lyra stood at the back, watching, listening. "We're vulnerable," Draven said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "Varric's betrayal cost us men. The raid cost us supplies. And word is spreading that Frost Peak is weak." "We're not weak," one of the commanders growled. "We drove them back." "Barely, and they'll come again. Stronger, smarter." Draven's eyes swept the room. "We need to rebuild, fast, double the patrols, reinforce the walls, and I want every able-bodied warrior training twice as hard." Marin stepped forward. "My lord, the servants are already stretched thin. If we pull more people for construction, then we pull them. This fortress stands or falls on strength. You all know that." Silence fell. Lyra felt the old tension creeping back, the old fear. She could smell it rising from the gathered warriors, doubt, exhaustion, resentment simmering beneath the surface. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Or we could ask for help." Every head turned. Draven's expression darkened. "What?" "The southern clans, the traders who pass through the valley. We have allies." "We have no allies," Draven interrupted, his voice hard. "We have trading partners." "That's not the same thing." "It could be, if we offered them something in return." "Like what? Our weakness on display?" "Like partnership, protection, a united front against the raiders." Lyra held his gaze. "You said it yourself, we're vulnerable. Going it alone makes us a target, but if we build alliances, alliances are chains, one of the warriors spat. The moment we rely on others, they control us. Or, Lyra countered, the moment we work together, we're all stronger. The warrior laughed. You've been here, what, a month? And you think you understand how this world works? I understand that isolation killed Varric's ambition, but it's also killing this fortress. You're so busy proving you don't need anyone that you're bleeding out. The room erupted. Half the warriors shouted agreement, half shouted her down. Merrin stood silent, her expression unreadable. And Draven? Draven stared at Lyra like she'd just set fire to his throne. Enough! His voice cracked like thunder. The room went silent. This meeting is over. Everyone out. The warriors filed out, some glaring at Lyra, others looking thoughtful. When the hall was empty, Draven turned on her. Don't ever do that again. Do what? Tell the truth? Undermine me in front of my council. I wasn't undermining you. I was trying to help. I don't need help. I need loyalty. You have my loyalty. Lyra's voice rose. But loyalty doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean watching you make the same mistakes that got Varric killed. Draven's jaw clenched. What mistakes? Isolation. Pride. Believing that strength means standing alone. She stepped closer. You're afraid of being betrayed again. I get that. But pushing everyone away isn't going to protect you. It's just going to leave you alone when the next attack comes. I've survived this long on my own. Surviving isn't living. The words hung between them. Draven turned away, his shoulders tight. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. He was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, my father trusted everyone. He believed in alliances, treaties, shared strength. His voice turned bitter. And it got him killed. One of his so-called allies poisoned him at a peace summit, smiled to his face and slipped poison in his wine. Lyra's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me a lesson. Trust gets you killed. Fear keeps you alive. And what about love? He turned sharply. What? You're afraid to trust anyone because trust feels like weakness. But what about love? What about caring about someone enough to let them see you're not invincible? Draven stared at her. Love is a liability. Love is the only thing that matters. Not here. Not in this world. Lyra closed the distance between them. Then maybe it's time to change the world. For a moment, she thought he might actually listen. Then his expression shuddered. Get out. Draven, I said get out. She left, but she didn't give up. Over the next week, Lyra did something reckless. She started talking to people, not just the servants or the young warriors. Everyone. She asked about their families, their homes before Frost Peak, what they wanted beyond survival. Most were suspicious at first, some refused to answer, but slowly, carefully, she built trust. She learned that Terran, the gruff commander who'd tried to send Finn to the North Tower, had a daughter in the southern villages he hadn't seen in 3 years. That Merrin had lost her son in a raid and buried her grief under iron discipline. That Kara dreamed of opening a bakery somewhere far from the frontier. She learned that beneath the fear and the violence, people were just people. Tired, scared, hoping for something better, and she started planting seeds. What if we didn't have to fight alone, she'd ask. What if there was a way to protect the fortress without bleeding ourselves dry? What if we reached out? Most dismissed her, but some listened, and word spread. Draven noticed. You're stirring up trouble, he said one night, cornering her in the library. I'm asking questions. You're making people doubt. Maybe they should doubt. Maybe blind obedience is what got us into this mess. His eyes flashed. Be careful, Lyra. Or what? You'll send me away? Lock me up? She met his glare. You brought me here, Draven. You asked me to stay. You can't have it both ways. You can't want me close and then punish me for caring. I never said I wanted you to care. You didn't have to. He looked away. This fortress has rules for a reason, and those rules are killing it. They're keeping it alive. No, they're keeping it afraid. She stepped closer. I'm not trying to destroy what you built. I'm trying to save it. Draven's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard, just firm enough to hold her in place. Why do you care so much? Because someone has to. His grip loosened. You're going to get us both killed. Maybe, but at least we'll die trying to build something better. He released her and walked away. But she saw the conflict in his eyes and knew she was getting through. 3 days later, everything changed. A messenger arrived at dawn, half frozen and barely conscious. He'd ridden through the night from the southern border, his horse dead beneath him from exhaustion. Draven met him in the courtyard, Lyra at his side. "Speak," Draven commanded. The messenger gasped for air. The Ironclaw clan. They're marching north. 500 warriors, maybe more." The courtyard went deathly silent. "Why?" Draven's voice was ice. They say Frost Peak is weak, that you've gone soft." The messenger's eyes flicked to Lyra. "That you're distracted by an Omega." Lyra's blood ran cold. Draven's expression didn't change. "When will they arrive?" 3 days? 4 at most." "How did they know we were vulnerable?" The messenger hesitated. "There are rumors, traitors talking, stories about the coup, about you sparing traitors instead of executing them. I executed Varric, but not his followers. Some escaped. Some are in your cells." The messenger swallowed. "People are saying you've changed, that you're not the Alpha King anymore." Draven's jaw clenched. "Get him to the healer." 2 warriors helped the messenger away. Lyra turned to Draven. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done from the start." His voice was flat. "I'm going to remind the frontier why they fear me." "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. Ken. That night, Draven executed the remaining traitors. All of them. He gathered the fortress in the courtyard and made them watch as he killed each man. Swift, brutal, efficient. No speeches, no explanations, just cold, merciless justice. Lyra stood at the edge of the crowd, her stomach churning. When it was over, Draven addressed the gathered warriors. "Weakness invites attack, mercy invites death. Frost Peak stands because we are stronger than everyone else, and anyone who forgets that dies." The warriors roared approval, but Lyra saw the fear in their eyes, saw the way they flinched when Draven passed, saw the fortress sliding back into the darkness she'd been trying to pull it from. She found him alone in his chambers that night. "You didn't have to kill them all," she said. "Yes, I did. Some of them were just following orders, and now they're dead." He poured himself a drink, his movement sharp. "The Ironclaw clan is coming. If I show weakness now, we're finished. Executing prisoners isn't strength, it's fear. Call it whatever you want, it keeps us alive." "It keeps you alone," Lyra's voice cracked. "You think this is going to make people fight for you? It's just going to make them hate you." "I don't need them to love me. I need them to obey." "And when that's not enough? When the Ironclaw clan breaks through the gates and your warriors run because they're fighting for a leader who terrifies them instead of inspires them, what then?" Draven slammed his cup down. "What do you want from me? I want you to trust someone. I want you to stop pushing everyone away." She was shaking now, anger and desperation warring in her chest. "I want you to see that there's another way." "There is no other way." "Yes, there is. You're just too scared to try it." His hand shot out, gripping her chin. "I am not scared." "You're terrified." Her voice dropped. "You're terrified that if you let someone in, they'll destroy you, just like your father, just like Varric." Draven's grip tightened, then abruptly he released her and stepped back. "Get out." "Draven!" "Get out!" She left and didn't come back. The next morning, Lyra made a decision. If Draven wouldn't reach out for help, she would. She found Terran in the armory, sharpening blades. "I need a horse." He looked up. "Why?" "I'm riding south, to the border clans." Terran's eyes narrowed. "Does the king know?" "No." "Then the answer is no." "I'm not asking permission." "You think I'm going to let you steal a horse and disappear?" "I think you're going to help me, because you know this fortress can't survive a siege with the men we have, and you know the king is too proud to ask for help." She leaned closer. "But I'm not." Terran studied her for a long moment. Then he stood. If this goes wrong, I never saw you. Deal. He led her to the stables and saddled a horse in silence. As she mounted, he handed her a satchel. Supplies. Enough for 3 days. He paused. The border clans won't help you for free. You'll need to offer them something. Like what? I don't know. But figure it out fast, because if you come back empty-handed, the king will kill you himself. Lyra kicked the horse into motion and rode out through the gates before anyone could stop her. The journey south was brutal. The temperature dropped with every mile, the wind cutting through her cloak like knives. Snow fell in thick sheets, blinding her, numbing her hands. The horse struggled through drifts that came up to its chest. By the second day, Lyra was questioning her sanity. By the third, she was questioning whether she'd survive. But she kept going. Finally, as the sun set on the third day, she saw smoke rising from a valley below. The border clans. She rode into the settlement just as night fell. Fires burned in stone hearths. Warriors watched her approach with hard eyes. A woman stepped forward, tall, scarred, with silver braiding her dark hair. State your business, the woman said. I'm here to speak to your chief. About what? About an alliance. The woman's eyes narrowed. We don't deal with Frostpeak. You will, because the Ironclaw clan is marching north, and they won't stop at our gates. Once they take Frostpeak, they'll come for you. Silence. Then the woman gestured. Come. She led Lyra through the settlement to a large tent at its center. Inside, a man sat by a fire, older, gray-bearded, with eyes like flint. You're from Frostpeak, he said. Yes. Then you're not welcome here. Dravencor killed my brother 15 years ago. I don't forget. Lyra's heart sank. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. No, but helping us now might save your people. The chief leaned forward. Why would I help the man who orphaned my niece? Because I'm not asking you to help him. I'm asking you to help the people trapped in that fortress, the servants, the children, the warriors who didn't choose this fight. She paused. And because if Frostpeak falls, the Ironclaw clan won't stop. They'll sweep through every settlement on the frontier, including yours. The chief was silent. Then, what are you offering? Lyra thought fast. Trade routes, protection, and a voice at the table when decisions are made. Draven would never agree to that. He will, because I'll make him. The chief studied her. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. He almost smiled. I'll send 50 warriors, no more. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this goes wrong, we'll be the first ones they slaughter. Lyra rode back to Frostpeak with the Border Clan warriors at her back. They arrived at dawn, just as the scouts spotted the Ironclaw clan's army on the horizon. The gates were closed when Lyra reached them. She dismounted and pounded on the wood. Open up! It's Lyra! Silence. Then Marin's voice from above. You left without permission. The king's orders are to leave you outside. Then he's an idiot, Lyra shouted. I brought reinforcements. 50 warriors from the border clans. Open the gates, or we all die out here. More silence. Then, slowly, the gates creaked open. Lyra rode through with the border warriors. The courtyard was packed. Draven's warriors forming defensive lines, archers on the walls, every able-bodied person armed and ready. And in the center, standing alone, was Draven. His eyes locked on hers, cold, furious, lethal. You disobeyed me. Yes. You left the fortress without permission. Yes. You went to the border clans, the people who hate me, and made a deal in my name. Yes. The courtyard was silent. Draven crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. For a moment, Lyra thought he might actually strike her. Instead, he grabbed her face and kissed her hard enough to bruise. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. Don't ever do that again. You already said that. I'm serious. So am I. She held his gaze. You were going to let us all die rather than ask for help. I couldn't let that happen. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. The Border Clan leader stepped forward. King Draven. Draven's jaw tightened. Chief Aaron, your Omega made us an offer. Trade routes, protection, a seat at the council table. Aaron's eyes were hard. Is she authorized to speak for you? Every eye in the courtyard turned to Draven. Lyra held her breath. Finally, Draven spoke. She is. The courtyard erupted in shocked murmurs. Aaron nodded slowly. Then we'll fight, but after this, we talk terms. Agreed. The Ironclaw clan reached the walls an hour later. Their war drums echoed across the valley like thunder. 500 warriors, armored and hungry for blood, spreading across the snow like a plague. Draven stood on the battlements, Lyra at his side. They outnumber us 3-1, he said quietly. Good thing we're not fighting alone anymore. He looked at her. If we survive this, when we survive this. When we survive this, he corrected, we're going to have a very long conversation about you risking your life without asking me first. Looking forward to it. The Ironclaw chieftain stepped forward, a mountain of a man with a voice like grinding stone. Draven Core, your fortress is surrounded. Surrender and I'll make your death quick. Draven's response was to draw his sword. The chieftain laughed. So be it. Attack! The army surged forward, and the battle began. It was chaos. The Ironclaw warriors hit the gates like a battering ram. Arrows rained from the walls. Draven's warriors fought like demons, every man and woman refusing to give an inch. But the enemy kept coming. Lyra fought alongside the Border Clan warriors, a borrowed sword in her hands. She wasn't trained for this, wasn't built for this. But she swung anyway, clumsy and desperate, driven by adrenaline and terror. A warrior came at her. She blocked poorly. He knocked her to the ground. Finn appeared out of nowhere, driving a dagger into the man's side. Stay down! The boy screamed, but Lyra was already scrambling up, grabbing her sword, diving back into the fray. The battle raged for hours. Blood turned the snow red. Bodies piled at the gates. The walls cracked under the assault. And then, just when Lyra thought they couldn't hold, a horn sounded from the west. Every head turned. Over the ridge, a new force appeared. More border clans. Hundreds of them. Chief Aaron's reinforcements. Draven's eyes widened. Lyra felt tears on her frozen cheeks. The reinforcements slammed into the Ironclaw army's flank. Caught between two forces, the enemy broke. The chieftain roared orders, trying to rally his men. Draven leapt from the wall and charged. They met in the center of the battlefield. Two alphas. Two kings. Fighting for dominance. The duel was brutal, fast, vicious. The chieftain was stronger, but Draven was faster. And when the chieftain overextended, Draven drove his blade through the man's throat. The Ironclaw army shattered. Warriors fled south, abandoning their weapons, their wounded, their pride. Frostpeak stood. The aftermath was a blur. Wounded everywhere, smoke rising from burned buildings, warriors collapsing from exhaustion. Lyra found Draven sitting alone on the steps of the keep, covered in blood, his sword across his knees. She sat beside him without speaking. Finally, he broke the silence. You saved us. We saved us. You went against my orders, risked everything, made deals I never authorized. He looked at her. You should have died out there. But I didn't, because you're reckless and stubborn and completely insane. Probably. He laughed. Sharp, exhausted, real. What am I going to do with you? Keep me, if you're smart. Draven pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I'm not letting you go. Ever. You know that, right? Good. He kissed her. And for a moment, surrounded by death and destruction, they both felt something impossible. Peace. That night, Draven called another council. The hall was packed. His warriors, the Border Clan leaders, Marin, Terran, everyone who'd fought. We won today, Draven said, his voice carrying through the room. But barely. And we only survived because we had help. He looked at Chief Aaron. You came when we needed you, even though I gave you every reason to let us die. Your Omega convinced me, Aaron said. She has a gift for annoying speeches. Laughter rippled through the hall. Draven's gaze swept the room. I've ruled this fortress through fear, through isolation, and it nearly destroyed us. He paused. That ends now. From this day forward, Frostpeak stands with the Border Clans. We share resources. We share defense. We build something stronger than any one fortress or clan. Silence. Then Aaron stood. You mean that? I do. Then you have our alliance. The hall erupted in cheers. Lyra stood in the back, tears streaming down her face. She caught Draven's eye across the room. He smiled, and she knew this was just the beginning. But that night, as Lyra slept, something changed. She woke to Draven's weight pressing down on her, his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. Draven? I need you to know something, he said, his voice barely audible. Before it's too late. Fear spiked through her. What are you talking about? The poison. From Varric's blade. When you took that strike meant for me, his hand gripped hers. It didn't leave your system. The healer found traces in your blood this morning. Lyra's world tilted. What? It's spreading, slowly, but it's spreading. His voice cracked. You're dying, Lyra. The room spun. No, she whispered. That's not... I'm fine. You're not. He pulled her tighter. And I don't know how to stop it. Lyra's hands trembled. How long? Days. Maybe a week. No, that's not... We just... She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Draven's arms wrapped around her. I won't let you go, do you hear me? I will find a way. But even as he said it, Lyra could smell the lie. There was no way. She was going to die, and there was nothing either of them could do to stop it. There was nothing either of them could do to stop it. Lyra pulled back from Draven's embrace, her hands shaking. Show me. Lyra husked. Show me the healer's report. Now. He hesitated, then reached for the parchment on his desk. She snatched it from his hands and read by candlelight. The words swam, traces of nightshade compound, progressive necrosis. No known antidote, time remaining, estimated 4 to 7 days. The parchment slipped from her fingers. This can't be real, she whispered. I'm sorry. Sorry? Her voice cracked. You're sorry? I didn't survive the auction block and the coup and the battle just to die from a blade I took for you. I know. So fix it. I can't. Draven's voice broke. I've already sent riders to every healer within 100 miles. I've offered gold, land, anything. No one has an answer. Lyra's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, her back against the cold stone wall. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. She'd just started believing there was something worth fighting for, someone worth fighting for. Draven knelt beside her, his face wrecked. I won't give up. Do you hear me? There has to be something. There isn't. The words tasted like ash. You said it yourself. No known antidote. Then we'll find an unknown one. She looked at him. At this man who'd been so cold when they met, now desperate and terrified and completely undone. Draven? No. He gripped her shoulders. I refuse to lose you. Not like this. Not when we just... He stopped, struggling for words. You saved me. Let me save you. Lyra wanted to believe him, wanted to think there was a way out of this, but she could already feel it, the poison working through her veins like ice. Her shoulder ached. Her hands trembled, and beneath it all a creeping numbness. How long before I can't walk? She asked quietly. Draven's jaw clenched. Don't. How long before I can't think, can't speak? She forced herself to meet his eyes. I need to know. 2 days, maybe 3 before the symptoms get bad. Then we don't have time to waste. She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the way the room tilted. What are you doing? Draven asked. If I'm going to die, I'm going to do something that matters first. The next morning, Lyra called a meeting. Not in the Great Hall. Not with the warriors and council members. She gathered the servants, the healers, the kitchen staff, the people no one listened to. They crowded into a storage room, confused and wary. Why are we here? Kara asked. Because I need your help, Lyra said. The healers say I'm dying, poisoned from Varric's blade. I have maybe a week. Gasps. Murmurs. Kara's hand flew to her mouth. I'm telling you because you need to know. What we started here doesn't end with me. The alliances, the changes, The idea that this fortress can be more than fear and violence. She looked around the room. That continues. With or without me. An older woman spoke up. What do you want from us? Information. Anything you know about poisons, old remedies, folk cures, stories your grandmothers told you. I don't care how strange it sounds. Lyra's voice hardened. The healers have given up. I won't. Silence. Then Finn stepped forward. My grandmother used to make a tea for when people got bit by ice vipers, said it could slow poison. What was in it? Winter root, silverthorn bark, and something else. I can't remember. Try. Finn screwed up his face, thinking. Moon petal? No, moonbell. She called it moonbell. One of the older servants gasped. I know that plant. It only grows in the deep caves north of here. My father used to harvest it. Can you find it? Lyra asked. Maybe. If the caves haven't collapsed, then go. Take whoever you need. Bring back as much as you can find. The woman nodded and hurried out. More people started talking. Someone remembered a salve their mother used. Another knew about a hot spring with healing properties. Piece by piece, fragments of old knowledge surfaced. Lyra wrote everything down, her hand cramping, her vision blurring. When the meeting ended, Marin appeared in the doorway. You should be resting, the older woman said. I'll rest when I'm dead. That might be sooner than you think. I know. Lyra met her eyes. That's why I can't stop. Marin was silent for a moment. Then she stepped into the room and closed the door. There's something I didn't tell the king. Lyra's pulse quickened. What? 30 years ago, before Draven was born, there was an Omega here. She had abilities like yours. Healing, sensing. Marin's voice dropped. She saved the old king's life after he was poisoned. No one knew how she did it. What happened to her? She died doing it. Burned herself out from the inside. Marin's expression was hard. But the king lived. Lyra's breath caught. You think I could do the same thing? I think you're desperate enough to try, and stupid enough to succeed. Tell me how. I don't know the details, but I know it required a bond, a connection deeper than blood. Marin paused. The Omega and the king were mates, true mates, the kind that only happens once in 100 years. Lyra's mind raced. Draven and I, we're not, aren't you? Marin's gaze was sharp. I've watched the way he looks at you, the way you fight for him even when he pushes you away. That's not just attraction. That's something older, stronger. Even if that's true, I don't know how to use it. Then figure it out. Because if you don't, you're dead. And this fortress goes back to the hell it was before you arrived. Marin turned and left. Lyra stood alone, her thoughts spinning. A bond. A connection. She thought about the way Draven's scent had called to her from the first moment. The way his pain had resonated in her chest. The way touching him felt like coming home. Maybe Marin was right. Maybe there was a way, but it would cost everything. Betited. That night, Lyra barely slept. The poison was advancing faster now. Her shoulder burned. Fever spiked through her body. She could feel her strength draining like water through cupped hands. Draven stayed with her, pacing the room like a caged wolf. The riders are back, he said. No one has answers. The healers in the south say the poison is too rare, too old. What about the caves? Did they find the moonbell? Not yet. The entrance collapsed years ago. They're trying to dig through. Lyra closed her eyes. Time was running out. There might be another way, she said quietly. What way? She told him what Marin had said, about the Omega and the old king, about the bond. Draven went very still. That's insane. It's the only option left. You don't even know if it's possible. Neither do you. Lyra, listen to me. He knelt beside the bed, gripping her hand. That Omega died, burned out. If you try this, I'm already dying. At least this way I'm choosing how. I can't lose you. You already are. She squeezed his hand. Let me do this. Let me try. Draven's face twisted. How? I don't know yet, but Marin said it required a bond, a true mate bond. She paused. We need to complete it. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You want to. Yes, that's permanent, irreversible. If we bond and you die anyway, then you'll have given me something worth dying for. Draven stared at her. Then, slowly, he leaned forward and kissed her. Not desperate this time. Gentle, tender, like she was something precious. If this works, he whispered against her lips, you're stuck with me forever. I can live with that. And if it doesn't, then I die knowing I loved someone who loved me back. The bonding ritual was simple. No ceremony, no witnesses, just the two of them in Draven's chambers, the fire burning low, the moon rising outside. Draven stood before her, his shirt discarded, his scars visible in the firelight. Are you sure? Lyra nodded. He pulled her close, his hands cupping her face. I've never done this before. Neither have I. I don't know if I'm doing it right. There is no right way, just us. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hand sliding into her hair. She felt the connection sparking between them, that pull that had been there from the beginning, now blazing into something undeniable. The bond snapped into place like a lock clicking shut. Lyra gasped. Suddenly she could feel everything, Draven's fear, his love, his desperation. It poured into her like a flood, overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying. And beneath it all, his strength, raw, primal, endless. She reached for it instinctively, pulling that strength into herself, using it to fight the poison spreading through her veins. The room spun. Lyra? Draven's voice was distant. What's happening? She couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. The power flowing through her was too much, like trying to hold lightning in her bare hands. The poison fought back. She felt it writhing inside her, resisting, burning, and then she understood. She couldn't just take Draven's strength. She had to give something back. She opened the bond wider, pouring her own healing gift into him, showing him how to see the poison, how to target it, how to burn it out. Their powers merged. Lyra screamed. Draven caught her as she collapsed, both of them shaking, both of them burning from the inside out. Don't stop, she gasped. Don't let go. I won't. I've got you. They clung to each other, their combined strength battling the poison cell by cell. It was agony, like being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time. But slowly, painfully, the poison began to lose. Lyra felt it fracturing, dissolving, dying, and when the last trace finally burned away, she collapsed into Draven's arms. Bobs. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, she just lay there, disoriented. Then the memories came rushing back. The poison, the bond, the burning. She sat up slowly, testing her body. No pain, no numbness, no fever. Her shoulder, the wound that had been slowly killing her, was healed. Not perfectly. The scar remained, a jagged line across her skin. But the flesh was whole, healthy. She was alive. Draven? He was slumped in a chair by the fire, his head in his hands. When he heard her voice, he looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was pale. But when he saw her sitting up, something broke in his expression. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. You're alive, he breathed. So are you. I thought I lost you. You didn't. She pulled back to look at him. We did it. The bond. It worked. I can feel you, he said wonderingly. Inside my head, your emotions, your thoughts. I can feel you too. They stared at each other. Then Draven laughed, sharp and disbelieving and completely overwhelmed. We're insane. Probably. We just bonded to save your life using a technique no one's attempted in 30 years. And it worked. And it worked. He shook his head. You're going to drive me crazy, aren't you? Every single day. He kissed her. And this time, there was no fear, no desperation, just joy. Word spread through the fortress like wildfire. The Omega had survived. The king had bonded with her. The impossible had happened. When Lyra finally left Draven's chambers, weak but walking, people stopped to stare, some with awe, some with suspicion, but no one looked away. She found Marin in the kitchens, overseeing preparations for the evening meal. You lived, the older woman said. I did. How? The bond, just like you said. We combined our strengths and burned the poison out. Marin's expression was unreadable. You realize what this means. What? You're not just the king's Omega anymore. You're his mate, his equal. Marin leaned closer. People will either love you or hate you for that. There's no middle ground. I can live with that. Can you? Because the enemies won't just target Draven anymore. They'll target you. And they'll use every weakness, every mistake, every moment of compassion against you. Lyra met her eyes. Let them try. For the first time since they'd met, Marin smiled. You might actually survive this place after all. That evening, Draven called another council meeting. The hall was packed. Warriors, clan leaders, servants who'd never been allowed inside before. Everyone who'd fought to save the fortress. Draven stood at the head table, Lyra at his side. You all know what happened, he said, his voice carrying through the room. Lyra was poisoned. She should have died. She didn't. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She survived because we bonded, because we chose each other. He looked at Lyra. And because she refused to give up. Chief Aaron stood. What does this mean for the Alliance? It means nothing changes. We honor our agreements. We build something stronger together. Draven's gaze swept the room. But it also means this fortress operates differently from now on. Lyra isn't just my mate. She's my partner. She speaks with my authority. And anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Silence. Then Terran stepped forward. With respect, my lord, she's an Omega. Omegas don't lead. This one does. But, do you have a problem with that, Commander? Terran hesitated. Then, slowly, he knelt. No, my lord. One by one, the others followed. Even Marin. Even Chief Aaron. Until the entire hall was kneeling. Lyra stood there, overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. Draven took her hand. You did this, not me. You. We did this. No. He smiled. You started it. I just finally listened. Over the next weeks, the fortress transformed. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But piece by piece. The servants who'd been working themselves to exhaustion got rest days. The injured warriors got proper care instead of being pushed back into training. The children, like Finn, got assigned to age-appropriate tasks instead of being thrown into the deep end. And the fortress didn't collapse. Instead, something unexpected happened. People started volunteering, offering ideas, working together because they wanted to, not because they were afraid. The border clans sent more supplies. Traders who'd avoided Frost Peak for years started coming back. Word spread that the fortress was changing, that the Alpha King had found a mate who was turning everything upside down. Some said it was weakness. Others said it was revolution. Lyra didn't care what they called it. She was too busy making it real. Mom, one afternoon she found Draven in his study staring at a map. What's wrong? She asked. I'm trying to figure out how to defend the northern border without bleeding our forces dry. The raiders hit us twice last month. What if we didn't defend it? He looked up sharply. What? What if instead of defending, we negotiated? Offered the northern clans trade routes and protection in exchange for peace. They're raiders, they don't negotiate. Have you tried? No. Then how do you know? Draven leaned back in his chair, studying her. You really think that would work? I think it's worth trying, because the alternative is another war we can't afford. He was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. All right, send a messenger, see if they'll talk. You're trusting me. I'm learning from you. There's a difference. Lyra smiled. I'll take it. The northern clans agreed to meet. The negotiations took place in a neutral valley, both sides armed but cautious. Lyra stood beside Draven as the northern chieftain, a woman named Sura, scarred and dangerous, approached. You're the Omega, Sura said. I am. The one who survived poison and bonded with the Alpha King. Yes. Sura studied her. You don't look like much. Neither did you before you killed your predecessor and took his clan, Lyra said evenly. Sura's eyes narrowed. Then she laughed. All right, I like you. What's your offer? Lyra laid it out. Trade routes, protection from southern raids, a share of the Border Clan alliance. In exchange, the northern clans stopped attacking Frostpeak and its allies. You're asking us to give up our way of life, Sura said. I'm asking you to adapt. The frontier is changing. Either you change with it or get left behind. And if we refuse, then we fight, and we both lose. Sura looked at Draven. You agree with this? I do. Even though it makes you look weak? Strength isn't about how many people you can crush. It's about how many you can protect. Sura was silent. Then she spat in her palm and extended her hand. Deal. Draven did the same. They shook. And just like that, the northern border was secure. Chad. On the ride back to Frostpeak, Draven pulled Lyra aside. You're terrifying, he said. Thank you. I'm serious. You just convinced a clan of raiders to become allies using nothing but words. Words are stronger than swords, sometimes. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. I love you. You know that, right? It was the first time he'd said it. Lyra's breath caught. I love you too. Even though I'm a stubborn, broken, impossible man who didn't deserve you? Especially because of that. He kissed her. And in that moment, surrounded by warriors and snow and the endless frontier, Lyra felt something she'd never expected. Home. Ots. That night, back at Frostpeak, Draven called her to the battlements. What are we doing up here? She asked. I wanted to show you something. He pointed across the valley. In the distance, lights flickered, dozens of them. Campfires from the border clans, the northern clans, traders and settlers moving through the passes. A year ago, this valley was empty, Draven said quietly. Now look at it. People are coming here, building here, because they believe we can protect them. We can, because of you. Lyra shook her head. Because of us. He pulled her against his side. I thought strength meant standing alone. You taught me it means standing together. You were already learning. I just gave you a reason. They stood in silence, watching the lights. What happens now? Lyra asked. Now we build. We grow. We prove that this works. Draven looked down at her. Together. Together. He kissed the top of her head. And as the stars came out above the fortress, Lyra realized something. She wasn't the broken Omega on the auction block anymore. She wasn't the terrified girl who'd arrived at these gates. She was something new, something stronger. She was a queen. Not because someone crowned her, but because she'd earned it. And the fortress, the people, had chosen to follow. The frontier was still harsh, still dangerous. But for the first time in its history, it was also something else. Hopeful. Weeks turned to months. The alliances held. The fortress prospered. Children played in the courtyards. Traders filled the markets. Warriors trained not out of fear, but out of pride. And Lyra walked through it all, no longer invisible, no longer scorned. People stopped her in the hallways to ask advice. Warriors sought her counsel. Servants brought her problems they'd hidden for years. She didn't have all the answers, but she listened, and she tried. That was enough. One morning, she found Finn in the courtyard, teaching younger children how to hold a practice sword. Look at you, she said. A teacher. He grinned. You said strength isn't just about fighting, it's about protecting people. So I'm teaching them how. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you too. He paused. You saved us. All of us. We saved each other. Kara appeared, carrying bread from the kitchens. She's right. None of this would have happened if she hadn't arrived, but it also wouldn't have lasted if we hadn't fought for it. Lyra looked around the courtyard, at the people laughing, working, living. This is what it was always supposed to be, she said softly. Draven's voice came from behind her. What? She turned. A home. Not a fortress. A home. He smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded. You did that. We did that. He took her hand. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. Chut. He led her to the great hall. Inside, workers had been busy. The cold stone walls were now hung with tapestries. The harsh tables softened with cushions. And at the far end where Draven's throne had once stood alone, two thrones, side by side, equal. Lyra's breath caught. I had them made weeks ago, Draven said. I wanted to wait until they were finished. They're beautiful. They're ours. He pulled her toward them. You're not just my mate, Lyra. You're my queen, my equal, and I want everyone to know it. Tears streamed down her face. I don't know what to say. Say you'll sit beside me. Not behind me, not below me, beside me. Always. They sat together, hand in hand, and for the first time in Frost Peak's brutal history, the fortress had two rulers, one who'd learned to trust, and one who'd taught him how. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, Lyra stood at the window of their shared chambers. Draven came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. What are you thinking? He asked. That I was supposed to die on that auction block, or in that coup, or from that poison. She leaned back against him. But I didn't, and now I'm here, with you, building something that matters. We're building it together. I know. She turned in his arms. And I wouldn't change a single moment, not the fear, not the pain, not the fighting, because it all led here. To us. To us. He kissed her. And in that kiss, Lyra felt everything they'd survived, everything they'd built, everything they'd become. The broken Omega and the ruthless king, now a queen and her mate, partners, equals, forever. But forever, Lyra was learning, required constant work. 3 months after the Northern Alliance, winter arrived with a vengeance. Snow buried the passes. Temperatures dropped so low that fires barely kept the cold at bay. And with the freeze came hunger. The first reports came from the border clans, grain stores running low, livestock dying, children going to bed with empty bellies. Lyra stood in the council chamber, listening to Chief Aaron's messenger deliver the news. We need supplies, the messenger said. Flour, salt, dried meat, anything you can spare. Draven's expression was grim. How much? Enough to feed 300 people through the winter, Tehran spoke up from across the table. We don't have that kind of surplus. Our own stores are barely adequate. Then we make them adequate, Lyra said. All eyes turned to her. How? Marin asked. We can't create food out of nothing. No, but we can redistribute it. Lyra looked at Draven. The warriors get double rations. The council members get triple. Meanwhile, servants and families are rationed to the bone. If we equalize, you want to cut warrior rations? Tehran's voice was sharp. They need that food to maintain strength. They need enough food to function, not to feast while others starve. This is insane. It's fair, Lyra interrupted. And if we don't help the border clans now, when they're desperate, the alliance falls apart. Then where does that leave us when spring raiders arrive? The room fell silent. Draven leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're suggesting we weaken our own forces to help others. I'm suggesting we invest in our allies, so when we need them, they're strong enough to help us back. That's a gamble. Everything is. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Do it. Cut the warrior rations by a quarter. Send the surplus to the border clans. Tehran stood abruptly. My lord, with respect. Sit down, Commander. This will cause unrest. Then handle it. Draven's tone left no room for argument. The decision is made. Tehran sat, his jaw tight, his scent spiking with anger. Lyra felt it through the bond, Draven's uncertainty, his fear that this might backfire, but also his trust in her, and that trust meant everything. The warrior unrest came faster than expected. Within 2 days, complaints spread through the barracks. Training sessions grew tense, arguments broke out over meal portions. And one night, a group of warriors cornered Lyra in the courtyard. There were 6 of them, young, angry, led by a scarred fighter named Kael, not the traitor from before, but his younger cousin, bitter and looking for a target. You're starving us, Kael said. Lyra kept her voice calm. I'm redistributing resources. To people who don't fight, who don't protect this fortress. To people who keep this fortress running, the ones who cook your meals, mend your clothes, tend your wounds. She met his glare. You think strength only exists on a battlefield? I think Omegas shouldn't make decisions that get warriors killed. And I think warriors who threaten their queen should remember who's standing behind her. Draven's voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. The warriors spun. Draven stood at the entrance, flanked by Terran and a dozen loyal fighters. His expression was carved from ice. "You have a problem with the queen's decision?" Draven asked quietly. Kael stammered, "My lord, we're just questioning her authority, which is my authority." He stepped forward. "So let me be clear. Lyra speaks for me. Her decisions are my decisions, and anyone who threatens her answers to me." Kael dropped to his knees. "Forgive me, my lord. I didn't mean—" "You did. But I'll give you one chance." Draven's gaze swept the group. "All of you, accept the new rations, support the Alliance, or leave. Tonight. Your choice." Silence. Then, slowly, each warrior knelt. "We'll accept it, my lord," Kael said. "Good. Now get out of my sight." They fled. Draven turned to Lyra. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "They could have hurt you." "But they didn't because they're afraid of you." "They should be afraid of you too." He pulled her close. "You're stronger than half the warriors in this fortress. They just don't know it yet." "I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn." "Same thing." She almost smiled, but the encounter left her shaken because she knew this wasn't over. The resentment was still there, simmering beneath the surface, and if she pushed too hard, too fast, it would explode. 2 weeks later, a rider arrived from the southern trade routes. The message he carried changed everything. Lyra and Draven read it together in his study, the parchment trembling in her hands. "A summit," Draven said slowly. "The Southern Lords are calling a summit to discuss the frontier alliances." "That's good, isn't it?" Lyra asked. "Depends. They either want to join us or destroy us before we get too strong." "Why would they want to destroy us?" "Because we're changing the balance of power. The Southern Lords have controlled trade routes and resources for decades. If the frontier clans unite under Frostpeak's banner, we threaten their dominance." Lyra's stomach tightened. "So what do we do?" "We go. We make our case. And we hope they listen." He looked at her. "You're coming with me. Are you sure? You're the one who built these alliances. You're the one who convinced raiders to negotiate and servants to hope. If anyone can convince the Southern Lords—" He stopped. "It's you." The summit was held in a neutral city 3 days' ride south. Lyra had never seen anything like it. Stone buildings rose 3 stories high. Cobbled streets bustled with merchants and nobles. And at the city's center stood a massive hall where the Southern Lords gathered, men and women in fine clothes, dripping with jewels and arrogance. Lyra felt impossibly out of place in her simple travel cloak and worn boots. But Draven stood beside her, his presence a wall of strength. "Remember, they'll try to intimidate you. Don't let them." "What if I say the wrong thing?" "You won't. Trust yourself." They entered the hall together. Inside, 12 lords sat at a curved table. At the center was Lord Varen, a man in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, radiating cold calculation. "Alpha King Draven," Varen said smoothly, "and this must be your mate." The way he said it made Lyra's skin crawl. "Queen Lyra," Draven corrected. "Of course. Forgive me." Varen's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." They sat at the opposite end of the table. The other lords watched with varying degrees of hostility and curiosity. "You've been busy," Varen began, "building alliances, redistributing resources, negotiating with raiders instead of crushing them." He leaned forward. "Some might call that progressive. Others might call it weakness." "What do you call it?" Draven asked. "I call it dangerous. You're destabilizing a system that's worked for generations." "The system was broken," Lyra said. Varen's eyes shifted to her. "Was it? Because from where I sit, the frontier has always been wild, chaotic. That's its nature. You can't change that with treaties and goodwill." "I already have." "For how long? A season? A year? What happens when winter ends and the raiders remember what they are? They remember that we treated them like people instead of animals. And people remember kindness." One of the other lords laughed. Kindness on the frontier? You're naive, girl. Maybe, but naive beats cruel. The room went quiet. Varen studied her. You believe that, don't you? You genuinely think compassion can survive in a place built on violence. I know it can, because I've seen it. Then you're either blessed or doomed. Time will tell which. Varen sat back. Here's the situation. Your alliances threaten our trade routes. If the frontier clans unite, they control the northern passes. That means tariffs, restrictions, demands. We can't allow that. So what are you proposing? Draven asked. Dissolution, break the alliances, return to the old system. In exchange, we'll increase trade with Frostpeak and provide military support when needed. You want us to betray the people who fought beside us. I want you to be pragmatic. Pragmatic? Lyra's voice rose. You want us to abandon allies because they're inconvenient to your profit margins. I want you to recognize reality. The frontier doesn't operate on ideals. It operates on power. And right now, you're holding a hand you can't sustain. Watch us. Varen's expression hardened. If you refuse our offer, we'll have no choice but to view your alliances as hostile, which means trade embargoes, blockades, and eventually, he paused. War. Draven's hand found Lyra's under the table. Through the bond, she felt his rage, his fear, his certainty that this was a trap. Give us time to discuss, Draven said. You have until morning. That night, in their rented room, Lyra paced while Draven sat in silence. They're bluffing, she said. They won't actually go to war. It would cost them too much. They might, if they think we're weak enough to crush quickly. Then we prove we're not. How? She stopped pacing. We call their bluff, publicly, in front of all the lords tomorrow. That's a massive risk. Everything is a risk. But if we back down now, we lose everything we built. The border clans will think we abandoned them. The northern clans will see weakness. Frostpeak goes back to isolation. She knelt in front of him. We can't let that happen. Draven pulled her into his lap, his forehead resting against hers. You're going to get us killed. Or save us. One of the two. He laughed, sharp and tired and full of love. I don't know how I survived before you. Badly. Agreed. They held each other in the darkness, drawing strength from the bond that connected them. And when morning came, they walked back into the hall together. Varen smiled when he saw them. Have you made your decision? We have, Draven said. The answer is no. The room erupted. Lords shouted, some stood, others pounded the table. Varen raised a hand for silence. You're refusing our offer. We're rejecting your threat, Lyra said, stepping forward. You want us to believe trade embargoes and war are inevitable. They're not, because we're not the only ones who benefit from these alliances. Enlighten us, Varen said dryly. The northern passes you're so worried about? They're the fastest route to the eastern markets. If you blockade us, you lose access. Your merchants lose profits. Your lords lose wealth. She walked closer to the table. And if you go to war, you don't just fight Frostpeak. You fight the border clans, the northern clans, every settlement that's benefited from peace. That's not a war you can win quickly. It's a years-long bloodbath that costs everyone. Varen's expression didn't change. You're assuming they'd fight for you. I know they would, because we fought for them first. Loyalty built on charity doesn't last. Loyalty built on respect does. One of the other lords spoke up, a woman with gray hair and calculating eyes. What if we offered a compromise? Varen turned sharply. Selene, hear me out. Lady Selene stood. What if instead of demanding dissolution, we negotiated terms? The frontier alliances continue, but trade remains open. We establish councils to handle disputes. Everyone benefits. That sets a dangerous precedent, Varen said. So does war. Selene looked at Lyra. You've proven you can build something. Let's see if you can maintain it. Lyra's heart pounded. We can. Then we have a deal. Varen's jaw clenched. This is a mistake. Perhaps, but it's one I'm willing to make. Selene extended her hand. Do we have an agreement? Draven and Lyra exchanged a glance. Then, together, they shook. The ride back to Frost Peak felt like floating. Lyra kept expecting something to go wrong, for riders to ambush them, for the deal to fall apart, for reality to crash back down. But it didn't. "We did it," she said, almost disbelieving. "We actually did it." "You did it," Draven corrected. "That speech, the way you laid out the consequences, they couldn't argue with logic that sound." "You think it'll last?" "I think we bought ourselves time, and time is all we need to prove this works." They reached Frost Peak at sunset. The gates opened and the courtyard erupted in cheers. Word had spread. The Southern Lords hadn't crushed them. The alliances held. Finn ran up, grinning. "You're back! We heard you won!" "We negotiated," Lyra corrected, ruffling his hair. "Same thing." Kara appeared with Marin. "The whole fortress is celebrating. There's a feast tonight." "A feast?" Draven looked surprised. "Your idea, actually," Marin said dryly. "You sent word ahead to prepare it. Said if we survived the summit, we deserved to celebrate." "I did?" Draven glanced at Lyra. She smiled. "You're learning." Mate. The feast was unlike anything Frostpeak had seen. Tables stretched across the great hall, loaded with food. Not the sparse ration meals of before. Real abundance. Roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables preserved from autumn harvests. Music played. People danced. And at the head table, Lyra and Draven sat side by side, watching their people celebrate. "This is what it should always be," Lyra said softly. "What?" "Joy, community, people choosing to be here instead of being trapped." Draven's hand found hers. "You gave them that choice." "We gave them that choice." "No." He turned to face her fully. "You arrived at this fortress as a starving Omega worth less than livestock. You survived poison, betrayal, war, and a summit designed to crush you. And you turned a place built on fear into something worth protecting." His voice roughened. "You did that. Own it." Tears burned her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Maybe, but I definitely couldn't have done it without you." They kissed, and the hall erupted in cheers. Etik. Months passed. The winter eased into spring. The passes cleared, and with the thaw came merchants, travelers, and settlers looking for a place that offered more than survival. Frost Peak grew. New buildings rose outside the walls. Markets expanded. Children who'd known only fear learned to laugh. The border clans prospered. The northern raiders kept their peace, and the southern lords grudgingly honored their agreements. But Lyra knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. One morning, she stood on the battlements, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Draven joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That a year ago I stood on an auction block waiting to die, and now I'm here, with you, building something that matters. Regret anything?" "Not a single moment." She turned in his arms. "Even the pain, even the fear, it all led here. To us. To us." He kissed her forehead. "I have something to tell you." "What?" "The healers confirmed it this morning. You're pregnant." Lyra's world stopped. "What?" "You're pregnant. About 2 months, they think." She stared at him. Are you sure?" "They're sure." Her hands flew to her stomach. She hadn't even noticed the signs, too busy with councils and negotiations and holding everything together. "I'm going to be a mother," she whispered. "And I'm going to be a father." Draven's voice cracked. "We're going to have a child. In a fortress that's finally safe enough to raise one." Tears streamed down her face. "This is real. This is real." They held each other as the sun climbed higher, painting the mountains gold. And Lyra felt something she'd never expected to feel again. Complete. But the pregnancy changed everything and nothing. Lyra still attended councils, still walked the fortress, still listened to problems and offered solutions. But now she did it with a hand on her growing belly, with the knowledge that she was building this world not just for herself, but for the life growing inside her. People treated her differently, some with reverence, some with protectiveness. Warriors offered to carry things. Servants brought her extra food. Even Marin softened, offering advice on childbirth and child-rearing with a gruffness that couldn't quite hide her care. You're going to be insufferable as a grandmother, Lyra teased one afternoon. Maren snorted. I'm not the grandmother. You're the closest thing I have. The older woman's expression softened. Then I suppose I'd better learn to spoil children. 6 months into the pregnancy, Lyra went into labor during a spring storm. The fortress erupted into controlled chaos. Healers rushed to her chambers. Draven paced like a caged wolf, his fear bleeding through the bond so strongly it made her nauseous. You need to calm down, she gasped between contractions. I can't. You're in pain. I'm in labor. It's supposed to hurt. I don't like it. Neither do I, but here we are. The labor lasted through the night, brutal, exhausting. Lyra screamed until her voice gave out, gripping Draven's hand hard enough to bruise. And then, just as dawn broke, a baby's cry. Sharp, loud, furious at being born. The healer wrapped the infant and placed them in Lyra's arms. A daughter, healthy, strong lungs. Lyra stared down at the tiny, squalling creature, at her daughter, dark hair already thick on her head, eyes squeezed shut, fists waving. She's perfect, Lyra breathed. Draven knelt beside the bed, his eyes wet. She's ours. What should we name her? He thought for a moment. Hope, because that's what you gave me. Hope. Lyra tested the name. Hope Core. The baby's cries softened. She blinked up at them, her eyes unfocused but already so aware. And in that moment, Lyra understood. This was why she'd fought, why she'd survived, why she'd refused to give up for this, for her daughter, for a future where children didn't have to fear every shadow. The years that followed were not easy. There were still conflicts, still challenges, still moments when Lyra wondered if they'd made the right choices. But they endured. Hope grew into a wild, fearless child who climbed walls and argued with warriors and demanded to know why things were the way they were. She had Lyra's gift for sensing emotions and Draven's stubborn will. She was perfect. Finn trained to become a warrior, but one who protected instead of conquered. Kara opened her bakery in the growing town outside the fortress walls. Turan grudgingly admitted that the new system worked better than the old. And Maren, stern, impossible Maren, became the doting grandmother she'd sworn she'd never be. The frontier changed. Not overnight, not perfectly. But slowly, steadily, it became something new. A place where strength meant protecting the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. Where leaders listened instead of commanded. Where hope wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon. And at the center of it all stood Lyra and Draven. Not perfect rulers, not flawless leaders, just two people who'd chosen each other, chosen their people, and refused to give up. 10 years after that auction block, Lyra stood on the battlements again. The fortress had grown almost beyond recognition. The walls expanded, the markets thriving, children everywhere, a whole generation growing up in peace. Draven joined her, gray starting to thread his hair, lines around his eyes from years of smiling. What are you thinking? He asked. That I was supposed to die, multiple times, and instead, she gestured at the bustling fortress below. Instead, I'm here. We're here. Any regrets? Not one. Hope appeared, now 10 years old and already tall for her age. Mother, father, Chief Aaron is here. She says there's trouble on the eastern border. Lyra and Draven exchanged a glance. Some things never change, Draven said wryly. Good. I'd be bored if they did. Lyra took his hand. Ready? Always. They walked inside together, their daughter between them, ready to face whatever came next. Because that's what they did. What they'd always done. They faced it. Together. Years later, when Lyra was old and gray and her daughter ruled Frostpeak with the same fierce compassion, people still told stories. About the Omega who'd survived an auction block. About the Alpha King who'd learned to trust. About how they'd built something impossible in the harshest place imaginable. And about how love, stubborn, reckless, impossible love, had changed everything. Lyra heard those stories sometimes, told around campfires and in market squares. And she'd smile, remembering the girl she'd been, starving, scared, worthless, and the woman she'd become. Queen, mate, mother, Proof that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about choosing to keep going even when everything said to quit. It was about finding someone worth fighting for. And it was about believing, stubbornly, recklessly, impossibly, that tomorrow could be better than today. She'd believed it once, standing on an auction block with nothing left to lose, and she'd been right. On her last day, Lyra lay in the chambers she'd shared with Draven for decades. He sat beside her, holding her hand, his face lined with age and sorrow. "I'm not ready," he said quietly. "Neither am I." She squeezed his hand. "But we had a good run. The best. Do you think it'll last, what we built?" "I know it will, because hope is fierce. And she learned from the best." Lyra smiled. "We did all right, didn't we? We did more than all right. We changed the world. We changed our world. That's enough." Outside, the fortress was alive with sound, children playing, markets bustling, life continuing. Draven leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I love you. Always have. Always will." "I love you too." She closed her eyes, and in the darkness she saw herself again, young, terrified, standing on that auction block. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had everything. And as her breath slowed and finally stopped, Lyra's last thought was this. She'd been worth something after all, not because someone bought her, but because she'd chosen to believe she mattered, and that belief had changed everything. The fortress mourned, but it didn't break, because Lyra had built it to last. And in the years that followed, as hope ruled and her children grew and the frontier continued to change, one truth remained constant. The broken Omega who'd arrived at Frostpeak's gates had done the impossible. She'd taken a fortress built on fear and turned it into a home built on hope. She'd taken a ruler who trusted no one and taught him to trust everything. She'd taken a harsh, brutal world and proven that compassion wasn't weakness. It was the strongest weapon of all. And though she was gone, her legacy lived on. In every child who grew up unafraid. In every warrior who fought to protect instead of conquer. In every leader who chose to listen instead of command. In every person who believed that tomorrow could be better. Lyra Vance had been worth less than survival itself, but she'd become worth everything. And that, more than any throne, any title, any crown, was her true triumph. She'd mattered, she'd changed the world, and she'd proved that even the weakest voice could carry the sharpest truth, that love was stronger than fear, that hope was stronger than despair, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the broken ones are exactly the ones who know how to heal.